I'm so happy today that we have three panelists, and we're going to get in some great conversations about investing as a realtor. So I'd like to introduce Todd Slater, Anna Marin, and Kayla Smith. So I'll start off with you, Todd. Welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into real estate investing.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Todd C. Slater, and being a realtor for 30 years, I saw a lot of people that became real estate investors. And I started thinking to myself, hey, listen, you know, out hustling for commissions every single day, or can I actually get my money working for me? And can I get the timing set up where when I'm not working, can I still make money? So real estate investing kind of fell onto me naturally. And as things happened, I was able to stop trading real estate. And for the last 15 years, I have been nothing but a real estate investor. And we have a network of real estate investors with us as well at the Simple Investor. And it's just been a really exciting journey.
So excited to have you, and I'm sure you're going to be able to tap into some really important topics. A lot of us here in attendance in a webinar like this, we are just starting a real estate journey, but a lot of people have had the opportunity to invest in real estate. So learning how to do that in a way, and especially in today's market, is going to be really interesting to hear. So thanks for that, Todd. Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to find the real estate industry right out of business school and partnered up with a team at first for about a year. Got to learn a lot about the industry and fell in love with it, and then moved on to another team. And I was really attracted by their vision of real estate investing, helping their clients, excuse me, build generational wealth. And the team leader, which is my now business partner, was primarily focused on real estate investing from even before he became a realtor and had the #1 real estate investing podcast in Canada. So just becoming a product of my environment was really important to me, and surrounding myself with great people that wanted to achieve big things.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to hear a little bit more about how that mentorship has brought you into what you've been doing these last few years. And thanks so much for coming and being a part of this today. Kayla, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here. Oh, you're still on mute, Kayla.
All right. Hi, everybody, again. So I actually kind of went backwards. So I worked for the government previous to leaving to do real estate full time. And I bought a house when I was 23. And the only way I could do that was live in the basement and rent the upstairs, which I did for several years, actually. And then I was like, you know what, I can see the benefits from this. And then I started looking into it. And I got my license primarily to invest. Obviously, it's been two-way now. Instead of just investing, I'm running a small team in the Niagara-Hamilton area. But yeah, and then we just started to buy more, do different strategies. And obviously, it's gotten us to a place now where, again, like Anna said, generational wealth and building that for, generations to come. So that was how we started. And then obviously it's gone on a million different directions, but we're happy to be here.
That's amazing. It's always cool to hear the stories about how people decided to even get into the industry and having that idea that you wanted to do that to help with your own portfolio. And then it's kind of spun into you having your own team and having real estate be the majority of your probably working life. So that's an amazing story. And I'm really excited to kind of tap more into that. So I really wanted to thank the three of you for being on this mastermind today, and I'm really excited to have you guys share all of your knowledge for all of the 229 attendees right now. So I'll start off with you, Todd. So tell me a little bit about what kind of investing you do and maybe how that's changed over the years of you doing this.
Yeah, Matt, it's been an interesting journey. In the very early days, I was normally just buying, condominium, single townhomes, that kind of thing. And as soon as I realized that I could work in the multi-res section, I felt it was a lot better. So I went to the outer markets and started buying, small apartment buildings, could be 10-plex, 12, 18, eventually growing to the point where we started buying, 100 units, 300 units, 600 units. And to the point now, we have over 3,000 doors. So it's been an interesting journey over the last 15 years, but more importantly, it's really starting with the one of, and then when you can turn around and work with leverage, so a property buys a property, it's very key. And it's nice that Anna and Kayla both agree. Generational wealth is very key when you're working with investment real estate, and I think it's a great thing for people to understand and how to get there. But one property goes to two, becomes four, becomes eight. It's a very easy equation to work with. And in Kayla's case, which is great, starting off, living in the basement, starting off with that property, you can then expand from there. So that's basically what I did, right from the grassroots. And as I said, we've got multiple properties now.
That's fantastic. For you to start, from that first property, is there something that you kind of can share that you took away from that first experience that helped leverage you to get you on that track to continue to multiply them?
Yeah, the key is, understanding if you're going to manage yourself, as we know, in the real estate industry, tenants can be problematic. So you want to make sure that you're targeting A, the right property, and B, the right tenants, because there's a lot of people that have the doomsaying stories. When I was a realtor, I did a lot of power of sales for the banks. I probably did over 250 power sales for RBC. Every single one of these properties was tenanted. So what happened was, unfortunately, the investor coming in just didn't really know enough of the rules, and the tenant knew more than they did. So again, that's one of those things that if I can implore everybody, make sure you know a lot about the rules of being a landlord if you're going to self-manage, because out of the gate, it can really have an adverse effect and actually puts a bad taste in people's mouths. So, as soon as you have one of those tenants that doesn't pay you for a few months, you're not going to really be gravitating towards buying more properties.
That's fantastic to hear. Yeah, having those successes from the start and making sure that you do know the guidelines in and out is crucial. How did you kind of navigate that, Kayla? I know that with you starting with one property and you being in the basement, I'm sure that you had an interesting time at that beginning. So how did you navigate that?
I was lucky to start that I had a few friends that were going to Brock, so they moved in upstairs. So it was basically myself and a few friends. And then I had a group of girls that ended up living there for the rest of their school year. So it was tough in the beginning because we did share a kitchen, we did share laundry, we shared our living space. And I think one benefit of living in the house that you're renting is people who are not going to follow the rules or, aren't going to take great care of it, aren't really looking to live with their landlord. So that helps with if you're house hacking for sure. Even if you're in separate apartments, I think that still stands. So that was getting into it. And then again, we saw kind of the benefit of that, being able to pay the mortgage with the people upstairs and save for the next one. And then we moved into, everyone did like the conversion, the BRRRRs, so now we're doing long-term rentals, short-term rentals, commercial. I'm edging more towards the short-term space for many reasons, actually, that were just touched on. I think a lot of people are. But our long-term tenants have been absolutely wonderful. Like, we're very, very lucky. And we do extensive screening. So that's also partially why. But yeah, so we're kind of all over the place now in terms of what we have, but our focus now, I would say commercial and short-term.
I love that point that you hit on at the start about, you're really advertising that you're going to be an owner occupier of the property as well. It certainly probably gets rid of a lot of that clientele you may not want to have living in your rentals. So that's great. So touching on a point at the very end, your focus may be more on the short-term rental aspect of it going forward. With any of the regulations that have been changing across Canada, we see a lot of changes happen in BC over the last year or so. How do you navigate getting into the market of STAs and the changing environment of what the regulations could and couldn't be?
Yeah. So my advice would be, if your appetite for risk is not super high, go where licenses are already in place, where you can look at the rules, you can follow them, you can get your license. And it's not for sure, of course, but there's a very good chance that, I'll use Niagara-on-the-Lake as an example. They have a very strict set of rules of like what you need for your short-term rental. But once you have your license, you just pay a renewal fee, right? So the cities that don't have any sort of legislation, that can change at any time. So if you're going to those cities, that's where you need, alternate exit strategies. Make sure that it works as a long-term rental. Make sure that, or a midterm, whatever your alternate strategy is, or a flip if you're doing the renos, make sure in those cities specifically that that is an option. And then if you're working in a city that has said absolutely not, no STRs here, then you're just risking, of course, someone delivering a very strongly worded letter in many cases to quit what you're doing. So that would be my advice. It is all dependent on your appetite for risk. We like to stay in the no legislation yet cities, or the ones that already have licenses, just because every property that we buy will have an alternate strategy if they decide that, short-term rental isn't no longer allowed where we've bought it.
That's great information, especially navigating the unknown, understanding where the rules are in place and where they haven't. And where they haven't, they can really decide how that is from the groundwork, and then you don't really have any control. So that's some great information. Anna, what can you kind of explain about what kind of investing you've done and how that's kind of navigated you in your investing career?
Yeah, we've primarily, like me and my fiance and my family have primarily focused on multifamily investing, and we've picked two different markets, Hamilton and Windsor. Both similar-ish markets. I would say Windsor is a little bit behind where Hamilton is today, but you can still see the development. There's tons of growth coming to Windsor. There's a lot of government. I think it's the #1 invested in city by the government in Canada currently. So they're pouring a ton of funds. They're building a battery plant there, and they're a university school. They're a university town. They're also right across the border from Detroit. So you have a lot of good aspects of that city that we actually fell in love with for the investment purposes, and that's where we first bought. And now we're just looking to continue building that and scaling it primarily in Windsor. And just like Kayla said, also we're focusing on short-term rentals for our future.
That's great. So when you were trying to focus on those areas that would make most sense, those basis points that you touched on, like, the distance to the border, looking at where there's going to be large employment projects, how do you go about doing that in focusing on areas, especially areas that may be outside of your own geographical location and your home base? Is that research that's done beforehand, or how does that work?
Yeah, definitely research that's done beforehand. And I think it took us probably 6 months before we pulled the trigger on our first investment property. But we really wanted to make sure that the things that we could control, which are location, condition, and how we manage the property, were the first things that we talked about as a couple. And so location wise, like we were kind of living near and around the Hamilton, Oakville, Burlington area. At that point, it was a little bit harder to purchase in those areas. We wanted to go a bit more to a secondary, tertiary market to focus on buying something lower that's going to appreciate over time. And after digging into different cities, that's when we uncovered a lot of the things that are happening in Windsor and that area. And that's why we decided to go that way first. And we always knew from the moment that we were going to buy our first investment property, after already being around a lot of higher scale investors, that we were never going to self-manage. And I would say if you're looking to become a first-time investor and you're thinking about managing the property yourself, if it's in your city, definitely doable. If you're looking to invest outside of your own town, get a property management company. Yes, there's a cost involved. However, ultimately at the end of the day, your time is worth something. So if you're not taking the value of your time over somebody else managing that property on your behalf that actually knows the regulations, knows the LTB, and can also even draw up the financial documents for you at the end of the year for your taxes. That's why we chose to leverage from day one. And the truth is that we've only seen our properties in Windsor twice, like after we actually put in the offer and once when we went after closing.
That's amazing, especially when you do understand that, especially as a realtor and somebody who's running their own brokerage, it's difficult to understand sometimes the cost analysis between what you're saving when you're doing things yourself versus the time that you could be making money elsewhere. So it's nice that you're focusing on that and understanding, kind of the pros and cons of being able to go outside of your geographical location. That's fantastic. I'll come back to you, Kayla. So what are some unexpected things that have happened to you when you first started investing in real estate, and how did you navigate those?
I'm gonna take the positive lens first and then the not so positive because there's definitely both. One thing, like you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't even know that refinancing a property was an option to take out this money, like to buy other stuff. So I think one, we always talk about your power team, but talk to a mortgage broker and just figure out where you're at, because what they can do for you and what realtors can help with is like pick a case study property. You might not be there yet, but we can all help you with a pathway to get there. And I was lucky because one of my closest friends became a mortgage broker and he had investment properties. So, he was like, you can do this with the house that you bought that has now, gone up XYZ in value. And that's how we continue to do, the next one and the next one after that. Some of the not so positive things, like I think investing is wonderful, but it can be stressful and it can be shocking and surprising. Is just the problems that you don't foresee when you're doing a reno. Now that we've done so many, we're pretty good at calculating it's going to be within, this $10,000 to $20,000 range, which we're comfortable with. But when we first started, we undershot a lot, we overshot some stuff. The carrying cost was like something that I think this is definitely something I see with most first time investors is like underestimating what your carrying costs are going to be throughout your renovation, especially now where rentals are taking maybe a little bit longer. Things are a lot more expensive than they used to be. So it would just be really dial in, lessons learned, really dial in on your reno if you're doing one. You have the opportunity, especially in this market, to bring through all the trades you want through, to get the inspector and field your inspection to the trades. Like now is the time to really do that due diligence while you're conditional, so that if something comes up that's very surprising, whether it's in commercial or res, you have the opportunity, one, to negotiate if you choose to, but two, also to comfortably go ahead with it or back out of it. And I think that, despite obviously there was a craze during COVID, and that was wonderful for some reasons and terrible for others. I think now, especially if you're investing, is a very, very, very good time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying is, have that pathway and understand how you're going to get to those goals. And then once you get to there, use the resources you have and ensure that you are understanding all of the pros and cons. And, I love the idea of having that case study project and almost doing the analytics based on a property that you don't own, and almost getting that trial and error and understanding some of the kinks when it's not even a property that you have a financial pull to. So that's great information. Todd, can you kind of piggyback off that a little bit? How do you kind of navigate those unexpected things in a property?
Yeah, it happens in every property, and especially if you end up investing in more of an aged property. And in a lot of the marketplaces that we do look at, they're a little bit older. So you do have to be very careful. Kayla made some great points when we're talking about doing your homework, doing the inspections. But even, a proper engineer going in will still miss things. So you almost have to have a contingency slush fund in place. I think it's key that, you're not running such a fine line that if something does have an adverse effect. And when you deal with multi-res, as let's say Anna would in Windsor, we have a lot of properties there. You don't know when a boiler is going to break down. They tell you it's got 3 years of life and all of a sudden it breaks down. So if you don't have a contingency in place, and when you take a look at having extra financing, you can do that. You can turn around if you have some line of credit that you put out there just in case you have that emergency. So you can do it with capital improvement loans, things like that. One of the things that, we weren't aware of when we first started, but was a kind of a happy, side effect, was some of the government programs for doing some cost savings. So things like, heating, windows, roofs, a lot of these programs that are out there that, periodically you'll get the government offering. I think all landlords should take advantage of that, especially when you're using an aged investment property. And, there are some great programs where, it breaks down your cost to probably almost 10 cents on the dollar. So there's a lot of cost savings that, again, it's fairly easy. You get on the computer, you take a look at the municipality, find out what they're offering. one of the good things that I would say that, you know, we did in the very early days, before buying any kind of properties, was actually, you know, just like realtors do in their farm areas, if they're going to be working, is you drive around the neighborhood. You know, my first development I did was in Peterborough, and I'll tell you, I learned where all the Tim Hortons were. And you know, one of the things you do is you get an idea, who are your tenants going to be? You know, if you're dealing in the multi-res, you know, area, you want to make sure you have a good feeling for who's going to be your tenants. So you can get caught on that. And, you know, again, you know, on the panel, we've got some great realtors, but not all realtors understand rental property. So maybe the information they're providing when you buy something. So one of the things I learned very quickly is, great, it's on a sheet, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Do your own due diligence. It's the only way you're truly going to know your facts.
When making those decisions, Todd, like you're mentioning, one of your first projects is in Peterborough, and you go to the neighborhood and you start driving around, getting to know, you know, some of the landmarks and maybe the people that are living in the communities in the properties that you're looking at. When you go back and crunch those numbers, how do you have that quantitative measure on, okay, I've got the analytic part and they're the raw numbers, and then I have what I've seen with my own eyes. Do you kind of have to combine a little bit of both of those to make those educated decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a, you know, a really good point, Matt. One of the things I think that everybody should understand is there will be missed rents as a landlord, especially if we're not talking just one. And one of the reasons why I moved into the multi-res area fairly quickly, because I figured if I had 10 units, one person didn't pay me, and we can probably get through with cash flow. But the other thing is, of course, is that if it's a one-to-one, it can affect, you know, investors very quickly. So when analyzing the numbers, it was really kind of the risk reward. Now, one of the things that I focused on right out of the gate, and when we talk about tenancies, you know, people like short term, long term, sometimes they like lease to own. I was very focused on mature tenants. So this way, you know, I know that they could have a pension in place. They're always going to pay their rent. You know, I'm going to say, thank goodness I did that going through COVID. We really didn't miss any rents on our properties, which is amazing because of the tenancy. And, you know, this speaks to doing your due diligence, knowing who your tenants are. If you're going in, and it's sometimes better to buy an investment property that you make into an investment property as opposed to just doing a natural assumption of a tenant. And so you got to do a little bit extra due diligence on that tenant, you know, make sure that they have been paying their rents, make sure they're not in the LTB. You know, not all landlords that are selling are going to divulge this. So for us, every time I take a look at a property right from the get-go, I said, okay, I need to know everything about it because this could get me in trouble if I don't.
That's a great point. Anna, do you kind of take that same understanding of, all right, I'm looking at a property, I kind of have to analyze the difference between assuming a tenant that the previous owner had versus a vacant property that you can, you know, then develop your own tenants and start from the scratch? Is there a value that you kind of put on that as well?
Yeah, I think, well, like one of our first properties, we assumed a lease. And so when you assume the tenants, you also assume the conditions of that lease, right? So that was one of the challenges that we had at the beginning that we didn't even really realize or pay attention to because it just wasn't something that we were thinking about. I think we thought of everything else except that. And that just made our costs every single month a lot higher because the lease that we assumed included the internet, included the cable, included basically everything, where when that tenant ended up turning over, we were able to reset the lease and change that. But had we looked into that further, maybe we would have gone through a different property or bought a different opportunity if we knew that our carrying costs were going to be higher. But still, again, those are all things that we learned at the early process of actually going into the investing.
Yeah, it's nice to know too that there's going to be times where to get into the market, or even when you do research, like come on to a master series like this, you're still at that start going to be fairly green. So there may be mistakes, but those mistakes can also be learning opportunities for the next one. So that's always nice to hear that, you know, it doesn't always have to be perfect at the start. It's, you know, just trying to make the best decisions you can at that moment in time, which is great.
The one
Yeah,
thing
go
I can
ahead.
add to that really quickly is like you can you can try to go into it and not make any mistakes, but the fact of the matter is that you probably will, and you should be okay with that. But you can hack a lot of those things. So talking to people that have already done it, joining investor clubs, being like listening to podcasts, reading books, trying to learn the mistakes that other people have made already so that you don't have to make those mistakes anymore.
Hitting on some of kind of what we've touched on a little bit with the fact of, you guys are coming in, and we've chatted a little bit about projects that you've done personally, with then building that understanding from a personal standpoint, and kind of then relaying it back to your business in real estate. How have you guys kind of used that to leverage getting clients in real estate that are looking to get into investment properties or already have a portfolio of investments? And how do you use that to leverage winning some deals with that, with your own personal knowledge? I'll leave it open to anyone who wants to talk here. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Well, one of the things I did transition, so I don't sell residential homes any longer. But what I did though was I did bring in partnerships and JVs, and a lot of times people will want to own real estate. Perhaps they don't have the full down payment to buy it, but if you can create added value, then you can create JV partnerships. And this is what we're seeing a lot more in the industry, especially in the multi-res industry. You'll get a few people that get together, like-minded, so that we started doing some of that for our expansion purposes. And the idea behind investment real estate, it's like, what is your end goal? So if you're going to bring in a partnership, is it for 5 years, 10 years? What is the exit strategies for people? I think everybody has to understand what investment real estate truly does for you. I think part of this podcast is that we want to empower realtors to create some form of security for their future. It's an interesting industry that, none of us have pensions in place. And unless, of course, you have another job, or you've got a spouse that's got a pension, what we need to do is start really analyzing, what does the future look like as a realtor, 10 years, 20 years, potentially into retirement? Where are we going with this? So out of the gate, one of the things I wanted to do was attract like-minded people if I was going to do partnerships with people. And it's very key. I think that everybody should really, before getting into it, think about the end result. What are you trying to achieve? And I think that that's a big part of what we need to do.
Yeah, I love the mention of the end result. If you're getting into this, you kind of need to figure out why you're getting into this and what the end goal of that is. So that is such a important part that you just hit on. Kayla, how did you navigate that, and what have you thought of your end game for it? Oh, sorry, you're on chat. You're on mute again.
I said Europe.
There you go.
Yeah, but my husband still works for the federal government, so that we have he's working there. He's also a realtor. We have a few different businesses too, so we've invested in businesses as well as real estate. And I would say, I love working in this industry. I think all of us probably share that are here. That's why we're here. I don't know if I'll ever fully retire, as we call it, but to be able to have that financial location and time freedom and jump in when I would like to. And, we have a very great team on the real estate side, and the investments, you build the businesses, and I don't want to say they run themselves, because they don't. But, once you're more hands off, it gets a bit easier. So I would say over the next 10 years, kind of phasing ourselves out of working in the business and working on it.
That's great. And then kind of touching on that last point we had as well. So I know that you are very active in selling real estate, and you've mentioned kind of previously that you have been able to leverage a lot of what you've done on that personal level for your investor clients. Kind of explain a little bit about that and how you use that to your advantage.
So I think one of the principles that I go by is, if I haven't done it, I shouldn't necessarily be offering advice on it. So that's why we've dabbled in so many different things. Also, because we're interested to figure out, one of the advice that I always give investors is figure out what you like. because you're not going to like every investment strategy. And if you find one that you really do like, you're going to be a lot more active and interested in it. So, and obviously right off the get-go, like I didn't necessarily love living in my basement, but I knew it was a means to an end to get where I did want to get. So I think by, letting your investor clients know that you're doing what they want to do or what they've already done, you understand both sides of it, and then building your power team. So I have like a set of mortgage, Anna would know this very well, and I'm sure Todd as well, to have those people when you don't know the answer to something that you can get the answer. And I think that that's very, and also being very honest about like, I don't know this, I'm going to go get the answer for you, has been a big part of it. But I also do a YouTube channel. I'm on the Canadian Real Estate channel. So that's helped kind of display the knowledge of the area, but also bring investors in. And this is just for someone had asked the question about, I did a thing on how to screen tenants, how we do it on our back end. So if anyone's interested, that's where it is. But I would say make sure that your clients know that you're doing what they're doing, or at least interested in doing what they're doing, and learn everything there is to learn about it. Because you want to make sure that if someone's coming to you for advice, that you know that all there is to know, or you have someone that, can step in and assist you with the stuff that you don't.
That's a great point. So Anna, I'm going to turn to you and kind of try to ask you a question of, what factors do you look at a potential investment property, and is you could have touched on that in a little bit in our past conversation here, and how important are each one of those when making a decision?
Yeah, great question. Well, I would say like number one for me is location. Like I always make sure that I'm picking a location that I would want to invest in and becoming an expert of that area so that I know exactly what's happening. I know the regulations that the government's putting in that area. Similar to Kayla, like is there licensing processes coming into place? What are the bylaws? And just understanding like where I'm going to be investing my money, right? Also, condition is another one. Like when we're looking at assessing an investment property, we want to know what condition are we going to have to put money in. For the most part, we haven't done any properties that need a ton of upgrades or need a full reno. We haven't really dabbled into the construction side yet. So we're looking for more turnkey, maybe a little bit of lipstick here and there, but not like major wear and tear, because we want to have a pretty sound investment from day one. And then obviously cash flow is what we're looking for. So we're making sure that our carrying costs every month are way less than what the rental income is coming in. And that's primarily the major thing that we're looking at, because especially with the mortgage products that we ended up getting, basically they're paying the mortgage down and just building equity in the same account that we utilize, so that then in a year or so or a couple months, whenever we're ready to invest again, we just pull money out from that mortgage product. And so that's the three things that we look at, is the location, the condition, and the cash flow.
So the cash flow part of that, I know that a lot of investors are very analytical driven, and when they're looking at realtor.ca, they're looking to see if they have an advertised cap rate, or they're looking to try to get the realtor to find out what information there is about the current tenants and what they're paying. So how do you navigate those situations, knowing, so if a house has a long-term tenant that's now month to month, they've been there for a little while, how do you then process the fact of, okay, this is what the current cap rate is, this is what the income is producing with the property, versus what the potential could be from the other two sides, so from the condition side and that type of thing?
So like the question is, how do I analyze basically the financials and whether I go
yeah, and especially when you're dealing with your investor clients, like, a lot of people just are very obsessed with what money's being brought in on the property now, but how do you balance that with the other 2 points that you made, because it's kind of a combination, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think like definitely the most important thing for myself and my partner right now is mainly the cash flow, because we're looking to build up our passive income as high as possible. It is a bit of a weirder market right now to get higher cash flow, but still it's probably the main thing that we're considering. And because we already have the locations that we want to invest in, I would say that's probably the most important for us as well. But when it comes to working with a client, like what you like to invest in and the products that you believe in and the areas that you believe in might not be the things that your investor client wants or is looking at. Like I remember, especially early on in my journey, because I was so excited about specific markets, I was trying to push certain markets on my clients. And they didn't want that. They had their own vision for their own goals and what they wanted to achieve. So just be aware of that. And when you are dealing with investor clients, they're just as analytical as you are, or as the next person. So having resources like analysis spreadsheets, having people around you that can answer questions, like Kayla said, making sure you have a solid team, and having resources for different locations for investing. So I know someone in the chat asked me, what's a good property management in Niagara Falls? Well, you need to know certain markets and understand what are good property managers in different areas, especially if you are going to be working with investors or if you're considering investing yourself. So I think knowing those intricacies obviously is super important.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you mentioned the chat too. So everybody that is listening, feel free to continue to use the chat. We'll try to answer those questions organically as we go, but we're also going to save some time at the end to try to answer any questions that may have not been answered. So, keep those conversations going and feel free to chat amongst yourselves about the topics as well. So that's great. So, Todd, kind of coming back off of what Anna said, your situation now is probably a bit different. You've got over 100 doors. How do you make those decisions on where to invest and how to invest once you've got to that type of scale? And has it changed since your first 10 properties?
Oh yeah, it's actually become a bit of a monster. So we when I got started, I'd originally had a third party manager in place, and I wasn't very satisfied with the results. So what I decided to do is create my own management company. So now my management company manages all 3,000 doors that we have. And it was important that we did this because, again, both Anna and Kayla know that, good property managers are as difficult to find as there are good properties. And once you find a good property manager, it's key that you pay them well, you take care of them. But at the same breath, if they're not a good property manager, I'm going to tell you, you're going to want to get rid of them immediately because they will cost you a great deal of money. The LTV has gotten to be a real monster. And this is the one caveat that I will always warn people about, is that when you go into investment properties and you have a tenant that isn't willing to pay, the stories of the 8 months non-payment, it's reality. And so a good property manager will have a good paralegal on staff. They immediately serve the notices. So what we did was we evolved, and instead of putting it outsourced, we brought it all in-house. So we've got our own paralegal team, our own collection team, everything. So, and our own management team, our own supers. So it allowed us to evolve into basically a full-blown property management company. And that was very key because, as I said, coming out of the gate, we saw the struggle right out of the way. I was struggling, saying, okay, well, where's the rent? And property manager would say, oh, they haven't paid yet. And I said, well, have you given them an N4? And they said, oh no, we wait for about 14 days before we give them an N4. And an N4 is non-payment of rent. And it's like, well, why are you waiting 14 days? That's my money. And it's all the excuses that come. And so having the right property manager in place is going to be paramount for everybody if you're not self-managing. And so that was one of the biggest things, one of the biggest obstacles that, I had to deal with right out of the gate.
And some advice maybe for some realtors that are looking to get into this and they're just starting now, going through that entire process, Todd, where you have this many doors and you started from the bottom and you've learned from those mistakes and now you're a well-oiled machine. What advice could you give to those realtors that are looking to start out and maybe trying to have them learn from some of the mistakes that happened when you were starting?
Yeah, Matt, great question, because this is one of the things I think, and we have to start with the why. Like, why do you want to be a real estate investor almost? Because, there's going to be some headache. So, and then what is it that you're going to invest in? As we've talked about, sometimes we talk about older properties, sometimes we talk about condominiums. When you take a look at a brand new condominium today, unfortunately, the prices just don't work for cash flow. I mean, everybody knows this, escalated prices, even with better rents, we're still struggling with these. So a lot of times good investors will buy a little bit older product because, the cash flow can come into play. So one of the biggest things I have always taught my investor base, we've got our own radio show, we've got, podcasts, everything. One of the things I encourage people, understand your costs. So, as a joke, I say, go get your Starbucks and walk through Home Depot. Know what a toilet costs, know what flooring costs, know your costs. As a real estate investor, you need to know some of the things, and don't just put all your faith in your team. Now, your team you need to have, it's got to be solid, but the one thing you do want to do is be able to keep them in check, right? Because again, costs escalate. And as soon as that happens, then we start looking at our return on investment. It can drop, our cash flow can drop. So if I'm going to encourage everybody coming into the investment arm, do lots of due diligence, Anna made a great point, watch videos, read books. Be careful that you don't have the US narrative in Canada. There's a few companies out there, they're like flogging their books into Canada. It's not the same. We've got a US investment arm. I got to tell you, it's not the same. So be careful where you're dealing with the knowledge. So, if you're going to be investing in Ontario, find some of the good Ontario authors that write some really good books. Talk to, people like an Anna, Kayla, and say, hey, look, can I buy a coffee? Reach out to me. Same thing. I'd rather help people understand the pitfalls, the strengths, what you can actually achieve. I think we're all in agreement. Generational wealth is a key element for all Canadians. But the biggest thing is make sure you do some due diligence and know your numbers.
That's fantastic. I think that is probably one of the most overlooked things too, is that people think about getting into real estate investing and they jump head first, and they don't really touch their toes in the water to understand what the full ramifications and costs go into it. So thanks for sharing that, Todd. Kayla, I know that with you getting more into the short-term accommodations, costs might be a little bit different for you. You've got to factor in things like hosting fees and cleaning fees, and your maintenance is a little bit different because you're more of a transient client. So explain how you deal with those costs and how they go into your thought process on a property.
So I'll start with the reno, because we reno differently if we're doing Airbnb versus like a standard conversion where we're going to have long-term tenants. So the cost of the reno is usually quite a bit higher because we're going, higher end. The other consideration that I think it's obvious, but it's easy to underestimate, is furniture costs. And it's not just like your couch and your bed. It's also like your measuring cups and your mixing bowls and your blender, all these random things that you don't really think about, but people do really appreciate being there. But so what we've done is we've created this list of like basically all the inventory that we use repeatedly. And there's reasons why. On a very like easy example, it's just like a steel bed versus like a fabric bed, because steel, you can wipe down, fabric, you have to steam clean. And this is all cost to like add in. So we have this extensive list of all these things. We've gotten very good at sourcing furniture for minimal price, I guess. And we're sticking to like your Disc, your IKEA, your Structube, Amazon, those places. The other thing I will say is, from a maintenance perspective, yes, there's things happening in Airbnbs that, because there's people there all the time, and because it's usually groups of people and they're usually there for an event or something like that, there is more wear and tear, I would say, than most of our long-term tenants. But it's reported right away because the cleaners are there, 1 to 2 times a week. If it's something that, is worth going through Airbnb for, we do. And Airbnb is very quick to, like, when the guest says, no, I'm not paying for that, Airbnb is usually pretty good at covering the cost of anything that has been broken or damaged. So that is a nice part of Airbnb. If you're doing it if you're not doing it on an app, like if you're booking privately, I know a lot of people with cottages do this. I would recommend collecting like a damage deposit for their stay. Whereas on Airbnb, you don't do that, but you have this fallback with air cover. So that's in terms of like unanticipated costs. And then the cleaning and stuff, if your Airbnb is successful, your cleaning costs are they're going to be grouped into your financials, but it's still going to work. If it doesn't, if you're making less after that, than you would in long term, well, then maybe it's time to look at those numbers. However, some people are okay with that. Some people just like the STR model so much more, and not worrying about LTV, that they're willing to make what they would long term on Airbnb. So I think it's preference. But for us, it's just making sure that the numbers work after we purchase everything. Because it's even just like coffee creamers, supplies, toilet paper, like all this stuff, right? And then we also have several virtual assistants who are like, the nice thing is they're, you know, when we're sleeping, they're awake. And they're doing all of the financials on the back end. They're recording everything, they're invoicing. So it's, once you build it up, it does work quite well. It does take a long time though. I don't want to discount that. Like, it's a lot of work, but once it's there, it's certainly worth it.
That's a point that I had never even thought about, is leveraging virtual assistants for your business like Airbnb. I know a lot of people are leveraging virtual assistants in their own real estate businesses now for paperwork and things like that. But that's also a great aspect that would be able to help you when you're sleeping. So you basically have a 24-hour company. That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Anna, so for you, cost wise, you are dealing with at least one market that's quite a distance away. And like you mentioned before, you've only been to Windsor twice. So how do you deal with some of that stuff and the costing and things when it's not even a market that you're, really in or know about? Do you leverage locals, or what do you do?
Yeah, I leverage locals. Like, thankfully, I have good relationships with a lot of good realtors in Windsor that are also investors. So I got on calls with them before we even started investing. Whenever I'm looking for an updated home evaluation, I'm leaning on them. I don't have access to the Windsor board. So I purchased my home through a realtor. I didn't buy it myself. So I'm leaning on the experts of that area as much as like I can do my own research and take that time and build that knowledge for myself. I'm also giving opportunity for that local economy to help me and help my investment continue to grow. So cost wise, like I'm not really doing the research myself. I'm leveraging other people to support me, including our property management company, including my fiance. He loves building spreadsheets. So I'm really not focused on that primarily myself, and just leaning on the people that are really great at doing that.
I think that is one of the takeaways, Anna, is that I'm a lot of people, when they get into investing, they think, oh man, I'm just starting this out, and to make it work, I'm going to have to work day and night and have this be basically my full-time job. But you've looked at it in a different way, where you've been able to have that balance between owning investments and continuing to run your business and scaling your business, and knowing that there's areas that you can pay other people, and that time and energy would be used in a lot better manner. So yeah, that's fantastic. I think that we've had some great discussion. I asked a question in the chat a few minutes ago, and I would love to kind of get an understanding from the three of you as well. First is, clearly real estate is a big part of your future and your retirement future. What made you decide for that to be probably the most important and biggest part of how you're building generational wealth versus maybe some more of the traditional methods that people not in our circle would be doing? I'll start with you, Todd.
Matt, I think that's part of the reason why I was excited to come on the podcast today. And if I can share just a short story.
Of course.
Yeah, I was asked to speak at my brokerage a few months back, and it was amazing because as I said, I've been in real estate a long time. I started 30 years ago, and it was amazing because when I first started, I saw all these amazing agents full time, making big money and everything else. I happened to run into one a couple months ago. He's now about 85 years of age. And I said to him, I said, wow, you're still trading? He said, I have to. And I looked at him, I said, why? I said, you were so successful. And he said, I ran out of money. I just, I spent everything I earned. And he's 85. He has no retirement. He's got a rental apartment, and he had to list a home because he wanted to be able to pay his rent. And I thought to myself, I need to talk to people about this because, all of our viewers today, and thanks for tuning in, but, the real question I need to ask is, why are you tuning in? Where is your motivation at? Because for me, my personal motivation, it was for my family, the idea that I'll have strength and security, as I get older. Yeah. Do I ever want to retire? Probably not, but I'll have the option to, and I have a backup plan because I have security of real estate. I ask everybody out there, it doesn't matter if you're a new agent or if you've been at it 20 years, why aren't you starting? Because you are in the greatest industry in the world and you have all the inventory in front of you. And as realtors, we have the ability of saying, hey, we'll knock off our commissions, we can negotiate, we can play with it. But why are not more people putting their foot forward into one of the things that near and dear to you is secure? And, as realtors, we sit there and we sell houses and people will say, well, I lived here for 20 years. And it's like, well, you bought it for 50,000 and you're selling it for $1 million. You're like, and this isn't a government conversation about capital gains. It's look what real estate can do for you. And this is one of the things. So as I said, it was really when I saw this situation unfold in front of me with realtors that are still trading, and it's not just because they want to, it's because they have to. And, I think our panelists all agree that, look, if we're entrepreneurs, we're entrepreneurs. But the problem is we don't have to if we don't want to. But the problem is a lot of people as realtors, they didn't forecast the future well enough.
And do you suggest people think about that almost right away when getting into real estate, Todd? So I know a lot of people are thinking, okay, I'm getting into real estate. I need to figure out what this industry is. I need to be working for my clients. And they kind of leave their own personal maneuvers alone for a little bit because they're solely focused on leveraging their clients and their business. When did you start, or when would you suggest people getting into the industry to start thinking about this?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'll throw myself on the sword here. I made one of the biggest mistakes. I worked in the Mississauga area, Churchill Meadows, and one of the builders came to me and said, hey, we've got some inventory to sell. Can you list it, Todd? You're a listing agent. I said, great, I'm going to. And they said, hey, and if you want to buy one, you can roll your commissions in. So I bought 2 houses from Mattamy, and I went, hey, wait a minute, I can assign these. I can flip these. I can make some quick bucks. $265,000 house. One of them just sold for 2.5 million. And the purchase price at the time was 265. So I am aging myself here, but when you think about it, my downstroke at the time, I think it was like 30,000 a piece. And right now I saw one of them go up on the market for 2.5 million. So the thing is, there's never a better time than today. Okay, like we can make all the excuses we want. We can sit there and say, listen, I got to do more transactions. You need to take that little bit of that stress. You need to put a little bit of pressure on yourself, because I can tell you, today is the tomorrow you thought about yesterday. It comes real quick. Like I said, I'm 15 years as a real estate investor. I wish I had started this 30 years ago. It would have been a completely different tale.
How do you feel about that, Anna? Do you agree with Todd that there's no better time than today, or?
Yeah, I think especially starting out when I did, there was a lot of imposter syndrome around like why me kind of thing. Like I don't feel qualified. I didn't even feel qualified to be on this call, if we're honest. Like I feel, with Kayla and Todd here, like obviously there's so much value that they're bringing and I'm still just starting out. But when you let those thoughts get in your head, that's what actually stops you from moving forward, because that's fear showing up in your world. But I can say the process and the build-up of me thinking it was going to be so hard was the hardest part about it. The easiest part about it was actually just taking action and taking some steps, getting in front of the mortgage broker, making those decisions. And even like I said before, if they're the wrong decisions, you're going to learn from it, but just take action.
And that it's been amazing to hear you say that just getting started is the most important thing, because having those conversations like you mentioned before of, okay, well, where can I, if it's not now, how do I get in front of the right people where they can tell me how to get there in 12 months or how I can get there in 24 months? And having those initial conversations are free. Like we have people in our sphere that have the knowledge, and by monitoring the chat here, like there's conversations happening where other realtors are helping other realtors. There's personal phone numbers being attached. If I have a mortgage broker and you don't have one that does these types of things, sharing that information is so vital. So I'm so glad to hear that. And I know Kayla, oh yeah, go ahead, Anna. Yeah.
I was just gonna add one final thing to that. Is one of my favorite books is Who Not How. And so if you're thinking about how am I going to do this, you should maybe reframe and ask, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need in my world? Who do I need to partner with? Who do I need to hire as a coach? Who do I need to listen to help me accomplish this, rather than how am I going to do it?
And all three of you have been amazing with explaining that after this call. If there are people that have questions, like I'm sure I would say by the end of this call, if you got all three of you could share your social media, however you would like to spread your information, so people can kind of follow you along and ask you any questions, because these are three great minds who have done this from the very start, and they've done it in three different ways. So continue to leverage these conversations in these networks. And I know, Kayla, you getting in from a different perspective might give you a little bit of a different thought process. So kind of explain that to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I retired from the government, which retired, obviously, when I was 29 or 28, which my entire family thought I was psychotic. And I don't use that word gently. I was leaving a job with a pension. It was a great pay. It was Monday to Friday, weekends off, all these things. You know, you trade in your 40 hours to work 80, as they say. However, I will say, and to build off of what they both said, is between that and buying our first investment property, the first investment property, was the two scariest things I did. And I'm telling you, I've sat on both of them way longer than I should have. If I would have learned the refinancing, learned all of those things earlier, I probably would have been, quite a few steps ahead of where we are now. And I think that stands for all of us. And I also think that, yes, I, like Anna, I still don't know why I'm sitting here, but I'm happy to be here. But also just reach out to all of the people that are in your network, because I would say, in my experience, 99% of them are so eager to help. Not even just willing, but eager. We are all here trying to help everyone else, trying to build all these things with other people. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out. I was, and that was a detriment to my journey. So learn from us and reach out, ask the questions. I really do think that, again, 99% of us are here to help.
That's fantastic. I know that there's a lot of questions that were asked that we weren't able to get to specifically. A lot of people asking about methods in which they use to be able to leverage and finance, like HELOCs and things. So I wish that we had more time to answer every single question, but all three of our panelists here are more than happy to answer questions, privately. So if you did have any of those questions that didn't happen to get answered, please, use these resources and reach out and have more conversations with those around you, because everybody will have a little bit of a different answer. And before we kind of do one final wrap up, I did want to just note a little bit of a feedback survey that is in the chat right now. So we are giving people an opportunity to win a $25 Starbucks gift card by giving us a little bit of feedback about how the panel went today. It's going to ask you maybe some suggestions on things that we could do a little bit different, or the value that you did get from it. Please do that before you do log off, but we're being conscious of everyone's time. So I'll give everybody an opportunity to kind of do a little exit on, maybe where they can find you, and maybe what resources you can provide in the future. So Todd, I'll start with you. Take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So you can go to thesimpleinvestor.com. That is our company. You can follow us on Instagram, The Simple Investor One. Of course, we're also on YouTube, Twitter, all under the Simple Investor handle. The most important thing in what we can actually bring to the table is that we do have properties that we do full management, guaranteed rents to our investor base. They're part of our program. It's an easy way in. I think everybody just has to decide, what kind of investor do you want to be? And really, I think everybody should become a real estate investor.
Thank you, Todd. Kayla.
Closing words, just start before you're ready. Do the research, talk to the people, do everything you need to do. It's going to make, when you find that perfect property for you, it's not going to be the perfect property for everyone. It's going to make it that much easier. And again, I just stress, reach out to this wonderful, wonderful network that you probably don't even know exists. Involve yourself in these events, like Anna was saying. And I think it's going to put you 10 steps ahead of where I started. And, you'll be able to scale that much faster as a result of it.
Thanks, Kayla. Anna?
Yeah, I would say final words would be either join an investors club or create an investors club. Last year, we decided we're in the Vaughan area, so we've got a pretty wide market, and there was no one in our area that was giving the regular consumer, the general public, as well as realtors, the knowledge on how to invest. So we decided to build an investors club. So that's been running for about a year and a half. And the opportunities and the energy that get created in rooms like that, you're not going to find anywhere else. So either find one to join or create your own. That would be my advice. And yeah, like I said before, just take action. Don't let the fear or your own mindset hold you back.
I I think that today is kind of that wealth of knowledge that everybody logging on really needed. These conversations usually need to go beyond what an hour is. So again, use this as the fire to have the motivation of start doing some research yourself. Reach out to people that you know that could be part of partnerships, or if you're thinking about doing this solo, start having those conversations with people who've done it. But I really do want to thank all three of you, Todd, Kayla, and Anna, for taking the time to chat with us today. Your information has been invaluable to the group, and I know that there are some questions that have been left unanswered. So just remember, all three of them are on social media. They have websites, so make sure you're checking them all out, and give them a kudos afterwards. So thank everyone for being on today, and we're looking forward to the next Master Series.